Good morning. Welcome to the Friendship class, Sunday School class online, Premier Edition. And normally I'd be sitting in front of you in a classroom. I'm Lane Moore. I'd be sitting in front of you in a classroom at 9 o'clock on Sunday morning at the First Christian Church in Great Bend, Kansas. Well, we know things have changed. We all know that. And for the next few weeks, Sunday school class of the Friendship class will be coming to you online. Now, as someone who, for the most part of his life, has felt like a phone was used to make phone calls, my video editing skills are slim and none. So I tried to do this in one take. Well, that ship sailed a couple days ago. Yet here we are, and I've changed into a collared shirt, ditched my t-shirt. I did shave this morning like it was real Sunday school. Forgive the glare off my head. My makeup person is still in the shower. So anyway, let's get started. And one other thing, you're going to have to take my word for it. I am wearing pants. 18 and a half years ago, I subbed in the pulpit for Reverend Bill Johnson, our longtime pastor, and I was one of 3 or 4 people of the congregation that would fill in for Bill when he was gone to a meeting, gone on vacation, when we couldn't find a real preacher. Well, I was scheduled for September 16th, 2001, sometime in advance, to fill in for Reverend Bill. Well, as you know, that turned out to be the Sunday immediately following 9/11. And that was challenging, to say the least. It was a very dark time for America. And at the time I told this story, I told the same story I'm going to tell today. This is a very dark time for America. And what I said back then was, God will prevail. And it's because God always prevails, and God always prevails even in the darkest times and over the greatest of evils. Sorry about the yellow paper. I, again, am technically challenged, so I don't have an iPad in front of me to do all this. So you're going to get it on yellow paper, and you're probably going to get the screen blocked out once in a while. So this is the story of David and Goliath. You've all heard it. You heard it in Vacation Bible School. You heard it in Sunday school when you were young. Every time there's a football game on TV and somebody like Alabama or Oklahoma are playing a lesser opponent, the reference will be made to David and Goliath. And in those ball games, 99% of the time, Goliath wins, except for the 2003 Big 12 championship game. That's for you, Josh. So, anyway, just like America today is experiencing dark times, back in this time, Israel is experiencing dark times. Now, this was over 3,000 years ago when this story takes place, and it's found in 1 Samuel chapters 13 through 17. And I'm going to read to you during the course of this. I'm going to read several scriptures to you. You can look them up and read along, or you can read them after we're done, but it's all going to take place between chapters 13 and 17 in the first book of Samuel. Now, God's looking for a new king. God never intended Israel to have a king in the first place. God was always to be Israel's king. God had judges, and he would appoint judges, and some of those judges were Gideon, Samson. The judge right before the first king of Israel was Samuel. And the people whined to Samuel that they wanted a real king. So finally God gave in, and through Samuel, God appointed Saul. And Saul was the king, the first king. Saul's the king at the time of this story. But God's looking for a new king. He's disappointed with Saul. Let me read to you a couple scriptures. This is from chapter 15 and verse 10. Then the word of the Lord came to Samuel. I am grieved that I have made Saul king, because he has turned away from me and has not carried out my instructions. Now let me read to you another scripture. This is chapter 13, verse 19 from the first book of Samuel. Not a blacksmith could be found in the whole land of Israel, because of the Philistines had said, otherwise the Hebrews will make swords or spears. So all Israel went down to the Philistines to have their plowshares, mattocks, axes, and sickles sharpened. The price was 2/3 of a shekel for sharpening plowshares and mattocks, and 1/3 of a shekel for sharpening forks and axes, and for repointing goads. So on the day of the battle, not a soldier with Saul and Jonathan had a sword or a spear in his hand. Only Saul and his son Jonathan had them. Well, what's that got to do with God being disappointed with Saul? Well, the Israelites were fighting with farm tools. Now, they're fighting a lot of different nations. Examples, the Moabites, the Amorites, the Edomites, the king of Zobah, the Philistines, the Amalekites, and they're winning. They're fighting these battles with farm implements, and they're winning. But Saul thinks they're winning because Saul is such an awesome military leader. He thinks it's all because of him. He builds a monument to himself, not a monument to God, a monument to Saul. So how often do we attribute the successes in our lives to our own abilities rather than their true source, blessings from God? So God's looking for a new king. He's looking for a king that has a heart for the Lord. Let me read to you from chapter 16. This is verse 1 through 3. The Lord said to Samuel, how long will you mourn for Saul? Since I have rejected him as king over Israel, fill your horn with oil and be on your way. I am sending you to Jesse of Bethlehem. I have chosen one of his sons to be king. But Samuel said, how can I go? Saul will hear about it and kill me. The Lord said, take a heifer with you and say, I have come to sacrifice to the Lord. Invite Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will show you what to do. You are to anoint for me the one I indicate. So Samuel shows up in Bethlehem, and the elders of the town of Bethlehem are nervous because Samuel has been a judge. He is a prophet and a priest, and whenever a judge, a prophet, and a priest show up in your town, it's most likely because you're in big trouble with God. So Saul had to explain to everybody, no, you're not in trouble. I'm not here because God's upset. I'm here to sacrifice to the Lord. So when he arrived, he asked Jesse to bring out his sons. And Samuel sees Eliab, and he thinks, well, that's got to be the one. He's tall. He's the oldest. He's the biggest. He's the strongest. He's good looking. Saul, tall. Says Saul is a foot taller than all the rest of the Israelites. Saul's good looking. Stands to reason we're going to have another tall, good looking king after the one we're getting rid of. But that's not it. No. God says no. He said to Samuel, do not consider his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him. The Lord does not look at the things man looks at. Man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. So Jesse brings out his next two sons, Abinadab and Shammah. God says, nope, nope. Jesse brings out 7 sons. God says, no, that is not it. That's not what I'm looking for. And so Samuel says, is that it? Is that all? Jesse said, no, I've got one more. I got the youngest. he's out in the field with the sheep, and Samuel says, "What's his name?" Jesse says, "David." Samuel says, "Well, you better get David in here because we're not going on until he's here." So Jesse goes after David and brings him in. And let me read to you from 1 Samuel 12 through 13, chapter 16. So he sent and had him brought in. He was ruddy with a fine appearance and handsome features. Then the Lord said, "Rise and anoint him. He is the one." So Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the presence of his brothers. And from that day on, the Spirit of the Lord came upon David in power. Now it would appear that David's brothers didn't really know what was going on here. I mean, they were here, they were present, they saw what happened, but I don't think they really got the fact that David was, at one time in the future, going to be the king of Israel. Now, as I mentioned, the Israelites are usually fighting somebody. Well, shortly after this, we come to the battle with Goliath. And the Philistines are on one hillside. The Israelites are on another hillside. And these aren't just hills. These are steep hills with cliff-like edges. And the valley of Elah is in between. So the Philistines have Goliath. He's their champion. He is 9 foot tall. Now, the front door on most of your homes is 6 foot 8 inches tall. So Goliath is 9 foot tall, which is 2 foot 4 inches taller than the top of the front door of your house. He carries 125 pounds of armor. He's got a javelin that the head weighs 15 pounds. Now, a men's competitive javelin weighs 1.76 pounds. So the head of Goliath's javelin is almost 10 times heavier than the whole javelin you see at a track meet. Now, let me read to you 1 Samuel 17, 8 through 11. Goliath stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why do you come out and line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and are you not the servants of Saul? Choose a man and have him come down to me. If he is able to fight and kill me, we will become your servants. But if I overcome him and kill him, you will become our subjects and serve us." Then the Philistine said, "This day I defy the ranks of Israel. Give me a man and let us fight each other." On hearing the Philistines' words, Saul and all the Israelites were dismayed and terrified. Well, Saul's the likely guy to fight. Now, what's the point of this fight in the first place? I mean, why don't the Philistines just want to fight it out? I mean, they got the weapons. Well, they've also got Goliath, and nobody can match up to Goliath. Saul is the one most likely. He's a foot taller than the rest of the Israelites. He's the only one besides his son that's got armor and weapons, but Saul didn't want to go up against him. I mean, geez, if Saul's 6 foot tall, Goliath's 3 foot taller already. So we got a standoff. We got the Philistines on one side. We got the Israelites on the other. Well, why don't the Philistines just rush them? I mean, they can't get anybody to come out and fight Goliath. Why don't they just rush the Israelites and, pull a Braveheart and be done? Well, as I said, these are steep cliffs on either side. The Philistines would have to scramble down their side. They'd have to run across the valley. Then they'd have to scramble up the other side, and they'd be fighting the Israelites that were on high ground. Even though the Philistines had the weapons, that's a tough battle to win, and the Philistines don't always win. Even though they've got the weapons, they don't always win these battles. So they're counting on wearing out the Israelites and having somebody come out and fight Goliath. Saves a lot of bloodshed. Okay. So, David, all this time, he's tending the sheep. So Jesse decides he wants to know what's going on at the front. He's going to send David plus give him some food to take to his brothers. He's got three brothers. Three oldest brothers are in the battle. And David's going to find out what's going on, come back and tell Jesse. So he sends David with the food. Now, David, this is from chapter 17, verse 22. David left his things with the keeper of supplies, ran to the battle line, and greeted his brothers. As he was talking with them, Goliath, the Philistine champion from Gath, stepped out from the lines and shouted his usual defiance. And David heard it. When the Israelites saw the man, they all ran from him in great fear. So Goliath comes out another time. This is the 40th day of Goliath coming out and trash talking. Now the Israelites had been saying, "Do you see how this man keeps coming out? He comes out to defy Israel. The king will give great wealth to the man who kills him. He will also give him his daughter in marriage and will exempt his father's family from taxes in Israel." So David asked the men standing near him, "What will be done for the man who kills this Philistine and removes this disgrace from Israel? Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies and the living God?" So they told him again what the man who beat Goliath would get. He would get the princess. He would get to marry the princess. He would get a lot of money, and he wouldn't have to pay taxes on it. And neither would his dad or mom. So Eliab, David's oldest brother, the tall, strong, good-looking one, who also is afraid to go out and fight Goliath. When Eliab, David's oldest brother, heard him speaking with the men, he burned with anger at him and asked, "Why have you come down here? And with whom did you leave those few sheep in the desert? I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. You came down only to watch the battle, you little weasel." Well, the little weasel part, that's inferred. David says, "Now what have I done? Can't I even speak?" He then turned away to someone else and brought up the same matter, and the men answered him as before. What David said was overheard and reported to Saul, and Saul sent for him. David said to Saul, "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him. I'm your man, king. Send me in." So Saul replied, "You are not able to go out against the Philistine and fight him. You are only a boy, and he has been a fighting man from his youth." But David said to Saul, "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." Saul said to David, "Go and the Lord be with you," because, as I said, Saul didn't want to go out there, even though chances of David winning are pretty slim. Saul's willing to take that chance versus going out himself. So then Saul dressed David in his own tunic. He put a coat of armor on him and a bronze helmet on his head. David fastened on his sword over the tunic and tried walking around because he was not used to them. Well, this is armor for David's probably 5'2", 5'4". This is armor for a 6-foot man. David says, "I cannot go in these," he said to Saul, "because I am not used to them." So he took them off. Then he took his staff in his hand, chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them in the pouch of his shepherd's bag, and with his sling in his hand, approached the Philistine. Meanwhile, the Philistine, with a shield bearer in front of him, kept coming closer to David. He looked David over and saw that he was only a boy, ruddy and handsome, and he despised him. He said to David, "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. "Come here," he said, "I'll give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field." David said to the Philistine, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will hand you over to me, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. Today I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds of the air and the beasts of the earth, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands." As the Philistine moved closer to attack him, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet him. Reaching into his bag and taking out a stone, he slung it and struck the Philistine on the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead, and his face fell. He fell face down on the ground. So David triumphed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone. Without a sword in his hand, he struck down the Philistine and killed him. So what can we learn from this story? Well, first, makes you feel good, doesn't it? I mean, good guys won, bad guys got beat. We can all stand a little uplifting right now, can't we? Well, that's true, but what can we learn long term? Well, David was prepared. He put in the work. He protected the sheep. He had great faith. God knew of David's faith when he had Samuel anoint him. And David gave God the glory. David didn't beat Goliath and go out and build an altar to himself or a monument. No, he knew that the reason he beat Goliath was because he had faith in God. Now, was David without fault? Far from it. If you follow David's life, David made mistakes that would put most of us in the shade. I mean, how many of you have sent a man to the front lines to surely die so you could marry his wife and make an honest woman out of her? But even though David made mistakes, and he made them more than once, he had great faith in God. He loved God, he had great faith in God, and he was not afraid to let God use him. That's very important. He was not afraid to let God use him. Let's pray. Lord, you are the one true God. We know that there is no evil that you cannot overcome. Please bless the lost, those in body and spirit. Please bless those that grieve, those that are sick. Please bless those that rescue and give care, and bless those that lead families, schools, communities, states, and nations. And God bless America.